Welcome to Integral Christian Network Podcast, where we explore ways of evolving towards a more loving, inclusive, and embodied mystical Christianity.
Welcome to the ICN podcast, everyone. I am Luke, one of our conversation partners for today in this podcast, along with Beth and David.
Hello there.
Welcome. Hello, hello. Today, we are excited to move with the theme and topic of divine inspiration. This is part of a triad of divine vitality, divine inspiration, and divine vocation. So if you haven't listened to the Divine Vitality podcast, that's okay. But there'll be some tie-ins to that. And then following this will be our conversation with divine vocation, because these three are all interconnected in a way of some of the energies and essence of how we inhabit our divine being, how we live that in the world, and are we creating and bringing forth loving evolution and who we truly are. So, with that, today our focus is in this space of inspiration, inspiration. And so to start us off, we're gonna kind of maybe just hold that word a little bit. I want to kind of welcome the sense of its connection to motivation and why we do what we do, how and why we feel compelled or drawn or driven or um, engaged with whatever it is we choose to do. So that also brings in the will and our human will, the divine will, the will of God. Just a few small topics we might want to play around with a little bit today. So just opening up that field, I can say a little bit more, but I'll just start us off there and invite any just initial comments or senses or how we're entering into this conversation today from either of you.
The Divine Vitality podcast brings us into the place of being connected to Source. And I think it's important to name that, attend to that, even connect with that here and now as we welcome that inspiration that comes from that connection.
Yeah, when we combine words like divine and inspiration, it one of the first things that comes up for me is locale. How does this locate itself in me? How do I locate it in my world and myself and the world? How does it express itself? What does it draw me towards and perhaps from? Um, and I'd love to hear, Luke, how you've been working with it as well.
hmm Yeah, I love that. Both of those are really key in the sense of where does this inspiration come from? And if we're combining it with the word divine, we are holding um, a strength to that, a primacy, a divinity, right? A power in that coming from source, from God, from the divine, and seeing that as source, feeling that as source. We also, in our embodied incarnational engagement with our spirituality in ICN, find that source within ourselves personally, communally, cosmically, but that's not something we only seek outside of ourselves in a transcendent way. We welcome the immanence of the depth of the divine source within, and certainly, yeah, from divine vitality, we were with that. We were welcoming that as a flow, a river of living water, as this inner life force and energy that comes up into us. And similarly with inspiration, which comes out of that vitality, it's the inspiration, inspire, spira, of course, breath, spirit, and the in. So it is something that is something we can access from within and that comes from within. That's not just a personal, separate individual within. Maybe we'll talk more about that later. There's a communal dynamic to that as well. But I think a really helpful distinction, maybe to begin with, is um, a movement from a sense of God's will being this external plan or map or even uh, will that is out there, right? That's certainly the idea that I was taught and grew up with about trying to follow God's will was sort of this, um, unstated assumption of this, male figure in the sky that had this, sense of the way things were supposed to go. And if I surrendered and listened and tried to follow God's will, then that was the way of obedience. That was the invitation, the command, if you will. And so that's not necessarily completely wrong. There is a sense of will that is beyond us. But sometimes, I think often in Christianity and in many forms of religion, that comes with such a self-negation that that's the only place will can be discovered, and we deny or repress or negate our own inspiration, our own passions, our desires, our engagements in life, seeking for this God's will to be received from outside of us. On the flip side of that is kind of the uh, what do I want? What is my will? And growing up in Christianity as well, for me at least, that was kind of the selfish question, right? Well, I remember being taught at a Bible camp. I'm third, right? First is God's will. Second is what everyone else needs and wants, and I'm third. And yeah, wow, right? Um, but there is an extreme in this culture, in Western culture, and others, of course, of a selfishness, a narcissism, a self-centeredness, where it's all about what I want. What do I want? How do I fulfill my desires? What do I want out of my life? How do we move toward that? Um, and again, that's not a bad thing in and of itself. We're not here to negate or completely close off from our desires and our will, but those aren't the primary, the driving seat of what we do with our lives and what our motivation is um, to engage in the choices that we make. So there can be, I think, an integration of those that comes forward as what is God's will as is inhabited in our divine being. And how we feel that may come at times with a sense of surrender, like I do have to release something that I'm holding that might be less than that which is more good, gooder, truer, more beautiful. And then there's other times where we might unconsciously be drawn to a sense of obligation or shame or guilt. Like, I feel like I should do this, but it's not really coming from the true essence of who we are and our inspiration of our spiritual being. So, if we can somehow bring those together, I think that's where we find this way of being, this energy, this reality, this will that we're calling divine inspiration.
And there's our podcast. Thank you, everybody.
That's it.
I think not. What I'm curious to hear how you both I don't know, maybe what some of your journey been with for will and motivation and how you've moved through that in your spiritual life, in your Christian life. Yeah, maybe something like that if it's relevant.
Frankly, I'm not connecting with the word will today, so you have to cut that out, David. But that's yeah, that it's just not. I'm not disagreeing,
Hmm.
but I'm just not feeling it right now, and I'm could be active history that I'm carrying that I'm not even aware of at the moment. Um, that hasn't been a driving force for me to make sure I'm doing God's will. I might connect more in the moment with even Holy Spirit charge and even the embodiment of that and feeling, and people might relate to how they feel like their heart racing fast or something before they express something because it's like they are inspired.
Mm.
We are inspired. Um, and I'm also being drawn to the word agency that was used in the article. So,
Yeah. Wow. I mean, our so maybe it might be helpful to just clarify a bit more that we are indeed using will and inspiration not as synonymous terms, but as interrelated.
Hmm.
Is that
Yeah.
the way? Yeah, I
Yeah.
just wanted to clarify because I uh, I definitely I experienced those two differently. If I was inspired to do something and I felt like it was from who I understood God to be, I would definitely get that elevated heartbeat. I know I've got to do something here. Something needs to be expressed or said or shared or what have you. Um, and there was agency involved and there was energy and I was just talking with a friend about this recently that I'm so glad that at that time in that stage of faith that YouTube and digital smartphones were not around because I don't recall everything that I said around those times. So I'm just thankful that I did not go through that stage of faith in today's world because I don't know what people might remember. Although I've had some people recently come out of the woodworks and say, thank you for what you shared back in 2004. You know, I think, my goodness, I don't even remember what I said, but I'm so glad that it was a blessing and clarifying to you. Holy will was definitely something that throughout life has evolved for me from and I don't think it was necessarily bad. I just don't think it was always healthy. And so I want to delineate between the two. I never saw God's will as bad, but my relationship with God's will, as I understood it, wasn't always healthy. So, as you shared, Luke, my own agency and my own desires were tamped down as not as being tertiary or that secondary or tertiary to what the most important thing was, which was serving the world or, serving people, loving God. And yeah, I was pretty low on that priority list for even into my adult life. Um, and as I've had to do inner work on that, and by saying inner work, I don't want to just mean private work because I'm a relational person, and that means my own inner work is interconnected with other people, whether or not they're doing inner work. I'm still working and in relationship with them. So I have found inspiration to be multifaceted and to have this evolving understanding and experience and the energy has broadened the way that it brings delight into my life and into I think the lives of others. At least if I'm fully becoming more fully alive and others are becoming more fully alive, it's a beautiful song to be a part of. It's a beautiful life force to be a part of. When I see it come up and express itself in others, I may not be called exactly to do what they do, but I feel energized to say a cosmic, practical, concrete yes to what's being shared. So I'm saying a lot. This is again another one of those massively, there's a lot of implications to a subject like divine inspiration. We're not just talking about art or some kind of objective outside thing, although it includes those things, but we're talking about things that could fire on so many different levels.
Hmm.
I'd love to turn this back over and hear what's coming up in you as Beth and I are sharing what's coming up in us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's good to sit with this in the constellation of the different words and the experiences that lots of people have. I don't want to elevate my own or call out a particular sense of way that people understand this, right? Because there are nuances and differences to these words, to these felt sense, lived experience of will, motivation, inspiration, agency. I mean, this it's all around, I think, the the energy and the choices we make consciously, unconsciously, and how we live in a sense of devotion and calling and also purpose, meaning, value, right? These are not small things. So we're going to have vast, vastly different experiences with these, and listeners will have those too. And so I think it is probably good not to get overly lost or caught up in kind of the, I don't know, theological or philosophical senses of how we understand will or you know, things like that. But I do want to move more into the energetic of the experience, like Beth was saying, like this charge, this inspiration, as it is a felt movement in us that draws us into something, and that something that we're drawn into may be a creative process, it may be a loving act of service, it may be anything, right? Um, and then our sort of reasons for how we understand that motivation, what we're going underneath that, we're going to the more, I think, kind of primal charge of how that spark inspires us into something, and then our agency maybe kicks in. I'll bring that word back because you, Beth, you said that connected with you. So our agency to follow that, to fan that flame, to step into it, to move with it. There is a way of consent, assent, like, yes, I am gonna respond to that inspiration. I'm gonna live in and through it. So just welcoming that back in, that dynamic, that turning facet of the diamond. If you want to share any more about that, Beth.
Yes, and part of that, my desire to share is what David was saying, that that lighten up or being lightened, the word enlivened. Um, I'm catching that fire right here and now. And we recognize it sometimes in one another, and it is contagious. But one thing that I'm becoming aware of because of ICN's work around this trinity of divine vitality, divine inspiration, and divine vocation. We've taken some time in some of our spaces to consider how these might relate to the three faces of God: God beyond us, God beside us, and God being us. Again, we participate in the divine nature, and it's still one of those things that's uh, challenged, just like the whole topic of God's will or whatever, to really embrace. And in this process, I actually have a name that comes along for me with divine inspiration. It's a name in my sensibilities I heard years ago, um, personally, and it's union leader. I may have even mentioned that on one of the other podcasts, because it's having such an effect on me. Now that that's been named and claimed in me, I recognize that source of motivation. That source isn't the right word, using it in this context, but that animation that happens in me because I'm made for this union, this we are one. And now I recognize it even more in my daily life, how it motivates me or inspires me. I don't notice it and then I do it. It's more, it is innate. It comes through. It comes through in the most pure form when I'm consciously connected with Source, with God. I'm also learning what the shadow side of that inspiration can be. And if we think of that motivation, coming from somewhere that is egoic, uh, yeah. So for me, union leader can involve wanting to include everyone, and we are one. To have that so innate in me, so strong. If I move off of that divine inspiration, it can be, well, everyone needs to have a voice, everyone needs to this or that. So
Hmm.
I don't know if you can track that, but that's my experience, and it's becoming more and more real, more and more enlivening, joyful, uh, contagious. That word is surprisingly here now, and it started with you, David, sharing as you did. So,
Yeah, that's beautiful, Beth. I love that. That there's an immediacy to the way that you're sharing and talking about that, and a lived embodiment, right? That this is how this comes for you, and it really makes it palpable in it draws out um the essence of it, the closeness of it. Yeah, that immediacy, that's where it is, right? Because you said, because I'm made for this, like this is what animates, this is what we're talking about in the sense of divine inspiration. It's not like I see something that's inspiring out there, and that's great. That's inspiration too, but yeah, we are trying to talk about this inner animation, and it is an enlivenment, an energizing that has a potency, that has a charge that I can hear you describe, like it draws you into action, right? And that's beautiful. And I think that's another that's one of the movements of integration that I talk about in the article around like insight with inspiration, right? So like sometimes we talk about enlightenment versus enlivenment, or right, we get this understanding, or this, right, we want to have this enlightenment, this knowing, this enlightenment is a loaded word, means a lot of different things, right? But um yeah, I guess it's around how we're energetically charged in the enlivenment of what is um what is calling us forth, and that's so much deeper than insight. um because insight, while it's helpful and can reveal things and open things up, we can become addicted to insight, especially in this mental age, right? Where it's like, oh, I have to learn more if I get this, or, you know, oh, this new understanding. And we just kind of pile these up and accumulate them. And we think, oh, if we learn more, learn more, learn more, then then what? Okay, that can be helpful, that can transform, that can lead us deeper into places, certainly, but that needs to be integrated with the inspiration that calls us forth into something, right? That's not a collecting, but it's an animating that compels us into action, into living in a way. And that's just such a huge thing right now. This addiction to insight in our content saturated world is such an issue.
yes, yes, it's the the knowing is that inspiration. The knowing that, comes from out here is different. It's making me even think of the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. We're talking about life.
One of my favorite stories, I've probably shared this on the podcast before, but it was a key one for me. That was an insight I was reading, but it became an inspiration. Actually, it's so much more than an insight, because it's story. It was a lived thing that was told about Rumi in early on, before he became a poet. He was sitting around a well with his kind of followers and people, and reading books and discussing things. And the Shams, his great beloved, came in. This was their first meeting, and walked right into the circle and pushed all the books on the side of the well down into the book. And everyone jumped up and screamed, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And he turned to Rumi and he said, "You've lived too long on borrowed awareness." And that just hit me like, oh, yes, okay. Borrowed awareness, borrowed insight, borrowed inspiration. Like, no longer like go to the well, go to the source, find that inner inspiration, that inner true awareness of who you truly are, and live from that.
Mm, mm.
What's animating you right now, David?
Well, there's a lot to synthesize right now. But I was focusing on your words, enlightenment and enlivenment, and how that plays in with inspirations. We're using a lot of E's and I's in the ways that we're framing this. And you dropped a little comment, that enlightenment can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. But the way that I've worked with it over the years, I think blends or connects the enlightenment and enlivenment and inspiration so beautifully. With and I'm not trying to impose my definitions onto anybody in the conversation, but for me, it means relax. Not relax into passivity or annihilation, but relax into participation. That we're relaxing into, to use the three faces of spirit, that we're relaxing into connection with the vastness of what is, the immediacy of what is, and then the intimacy of what is, and also the incarnate of what is. So there's like this really energizing, to keep throwing out more E's and I words. Um, uh, we've been using that anyway, but it's this magic of not magic in checking out, but magic in that there's not a lot of, like, poetry comes close. If we're going to bring up Rumi, you know, a lot of these poets do an amazing job of articulating the ineffable, of giving expression to what it means, the mystery of participation, in a way that just not only makes us come alive, but engaged, but not in a push against others kind of way, but or a pull, or burning out because others don't seem to want to get on board with that. By the way, this is a complete rabbit trail, but if people aren't getting on board, maybe the inspiration is pointing, is like giving you something, but now there's a discernment as to what is it inviting either me into privately, which is not bad or wrong. We're not going to moralize. We're not gatekeepers on divine inspiration. But that sometimes, if we feel like it is for others and is for the world, then a wonderful, lovely discernment is, then how is it energizing others, like a candle to another candle? How is it being passed on in a certain way? I'll come back off of that little freebie, but yeah, like there's a sense that one doesn't have to tug or push or pull. That enlightenment literally means to make light. That it does life does not have to be heavy and weighing us down. There are times where that's inescapable. Trauma and grief work and loss and those kinds of things are real things that we don't want to spiritually bypass. But in the day to day, moment to moment, present based, realities, these are things that can make life enlightened,
Yeah.
lightened. That it's enjoyable moment to moment to be connected with myself, with my loved ones, with neighbors, and to be connected with the all. Um, I'm not saying that we should get into like maybe practical implications of this, but how have you seen? Is there like an example of how you've seen this show up that could inspire others, for how it might not specifically show up for them, but just get that kind of thought flow going?
I don't know if this is exactly an example, but what you just shared, David, reminded me that enlightenment, that relax into. I'm seeing in community in ICN, and we adopted another E word, and it's easeful, not easy. Operating in the inspiration is there's a difference between those E's, not easy, but easeful for whatever that is.
Good.
So,
Yeah, that was the word that was coming to me as well, this easeful. And it does include discernment, right? It's not necessarily like simple, although it can be, right? There's a simplicity to it in a way that you're not, it's not quite as tension filled or wrestling. Like I'm thinking back to those days that I described before and trying to discern God's will or follow that or what that feels like and looks like. And that was so much of like a wrestling. And I think here, and that could be with other experiences too, but just welcoming the easefulness of the lightened sense of when we live from that deep source of who we truly are, we're not in tension with that that energy and movement. Like it's flowing. More of the question, I think, is how do I express this? How do I enact it? Right? That's where the agency comes in. And that's, I think, we're also where the creativity comes in, personally and communally. So bringing in the we creating, like from that, that flow of inspiration and the easefulness of that, then comes in action. Here's another E word, right? In action, right? So it's again, it's different from this sense of, oh, I need to be out there serving the poor, or I need to do this, or I should really be doing this. Maybe there's some of those healthy convictions or, challenges that are brought into our life. Again, it's not always just like what I want, but it's from this deep channel an energy and movement of inspiration that compels in a way that is just like yes, like yes, okay. And again, it's not always easy. Sometimes it is a hard calling, but it moves us into ways of inaction that uh, look lots of different ways. It might be service, it might be in the creative process, it might be a calling to a gestation, to I need to sit with this, I need to stay with this thing that's happening in my life, in my relationship with my sibling or my son or daughter or whatever it might be. And it's like, okay, the inspiration is to stay with this, right? To not keep going and seeking more, the new, right? So there is a uh, maybe a clarifying sometimes that even comes in that. That's part of the discernment where it draws us from that depth toward that which is good and alive, or that which is hard and needing to be met and engaged with. That's our our divine agency, so to speak.
You're inspiring me a little bit here, but I'm sure I've shared this before too, and I know we're all hesitant to be self-referential, but one of the ways that I try to inhabit discernment in this regard, in regards to, I might not always use the word divine inspiration, but divine inspiration is a spectrum. And so I'm going to play with it a little loosely and not make it like some massive life decision, i.e. God's will is only epic life decisions, or down to, which toothpaste should I choose. God doesn't care. We can make that choice. But when it comes to really important embodiment, movement kind of things, is it some people call them bullshoulds, like I should do this, I should do that. One of the ways that I try to work with it is it an ought to, a get to, or a love to? If it's an ought to, probably not going to do it. If it's a get to, there's probably something performative in it that may have some mixed, kind of narratives in there. If it's a love to, even if it's not easy, um, the love is what enables the capacity to get it done. If I'm doing it out of duty, or if I'm doing it out of obligation, whatever the situation may be, moral, ethical, justice oriented, organizational, list goes on. If I am enlivened, uh, enlightened, easeful, if it's coming from a place of love, that's usually the point of discernment that provides the clarity to say, that's the way. I'm going in, I or we are going in that direction. And I found that, that has at least been helpful to me on a practical level to know, is this because I'm a firstborn and there's a certain aspect that's dutiful to me about this? Is this because, I was in clergy work for years and I feel like I ought to be doing those things? Or even is it a get to, because this will make me look good, whatever I'm a part of look good, all that kind of egoic BS. If it's got smacks of that in any way, then I need to keep clarifying for myself and really go, no, no, no. This, I love to do this, whatever this is.
That's good. I'm sure neither of you ever told your kids, you don't have to do this. You get to do this, right? That you've never used that language, right? No, I hated that when that was used for me, but I love that. Yeah, the love to like that is this, we're speaking of this, you know, yeah, this force of love, the vitality. We talked about the eros of that in the Divine Vitality podcast, right? There is this loving, inspiring force that is I think I used the word compelling earlier, and maybe I want to sit with that a minute because it's not a force like you have to, right? It's in some way though it is like, oh, I have to do this because this is who I am.
There's the
Yeah.
fine line. That's the,
Mhm.
yeah, not to interrupt. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. But
Good, good.
there are times where I feel compelled. I mean, there is just something larger than me is enabling me to head in this direction, regardless of any egoic activities. And I've always found that if it's truly a divine compulsion, and language is difficult to work with at this, if it's, I feel compelled by love to go do something, but I don't necessarily know what the outcome's going to be. There's a faith step in there somewhere, then it's always been worth it, right? So we're not saying moral compulsion like in a moralistic sense. There are morals involved, but we're not moralizing at ourselves or others to say you ought to be doing this. But we are saying that, uh, boy, there's something that's like a magnetic pull that's pulling me out of my comfort zone or pulling me out of my predictable patterns and behaviors, that says I gotta do this, not I have to, or I should, but I got, because I want to. There's a desire in there, right? Is that what you're saying, Luke? Am I? Is there? How
Mhm.
else
Yeah.
would you refine what you're saying there?
No, yeah, that's very good. I think you're expressing it well in that sense of it. Yeah.
I just want to add too, though, in addition to what you're saying and holding so beautifully, there to me is even the tasks that we have to do, because I'm mindful of the people listening that there are things that we have to do,
Yeah.
and that's such
Yeah.
a struggle. I mean,
Totally.
that's
Yeah.
one of the number one things people raise, like when and how. But even as we're doing those daily tasks, to be, again, I'm commercial for groups at ICN, but in naming these things, they are becoming more conscious, more present in every moment, every moment. And so even as I write a bill or whatever, what does that inspiration of union leader look like then? Well, I really I don't have to conjure it up, but I can attune to it and allow it to be and see what comes of that. And
Yeah.
David, oh, go ahead.
No, no, no. Finish.
I was going to shift, so go ahead.
Oh, it's just yeah, I just think that's so good to name and really put a point on because yeah, it's not all like I love to do this, right? There's lots in life that we have to do that we get to do, right? There are movements of reality. The way that I experienced that, and this is connected to divine vitality, when I first experienced a dramatic shift in my awakening to this um this divine vitality, I had all this new energy within me, and it was like, all right. And before that, I had been so just exhausted all the time, and my egoic energy was just like being drained in that dark night process. And I would go to work and I'd be like, oh, I'd come home and be like, oh, and my poor wife, she she had to endure that for a long time, and I did too. But when it changed, it was like, oh, I have all this energy and I still had to go to work, right? And it wasn't like, oh, suddenly now I have all this energy for work. Like it did help with that, but it's a different frequency, right? It was like, okay, I'm still doing the tasks of daily life. I'm still, at the time I was teaching or running errands or picking out the toothpaste, right? These aren't things that we're doing from our divine inspiration. They're not necessarily outside of it, but yeah, we're not talking about some idealized, inspired way of life where everything is sort of, glimmering with this golden aura of delight. So I think that's very good to make sure we're being clear on. Yeah. What were you going to ask David, Beth?
Yeah.
I was going to, he had used the word outcome, and that's mentioned in shift number 3. So I didn't know if you wanted to go
Perfect. Yeah, that's good. I was gonna go there too because we've been with I words, we've been with E words. Now let's welcome some A words, because um, we talk about inspiration, and then we can also have an integration with aspirations, aspirations. And the word that I bring forth in the article with that to integrate is ambitions. So integrating our ambitions with our aspirations. And so ambition can sometimes be a loaded word or maybe even a negative word in some spiritual circles or a Christian sense because, oh, should I be ambitious? Like, depends on the ambition, right? But a lot of times ambition, I like that word because it holds with it, for me at least, a sense of how where I'm trying to become something, right? It's not just like a goal, I'm trying to accomplish this. It's like I have an ambition to be a doctor or, right, to accomplish this, to write this book by this age. Those aren't bad things, There's a sense of ambition that we can have in our lives where we want to make something of who we are, where we want to grow and develop and get better at life, at living. And there's certainly unhealthy aspects of that, right? Where if we have an over ambition for success or money or certain things that can, uh, a lot of people I think are motivated by a sense of ambition, right? There's this desire to be something that I am not yet. And so I have to do XYZ to get to this place of becoming ABC. That was backwards, but you get what I mean. Similarly, though, in a different sense, I think aspiration, we've talked about inspiration. We do have these aspirations, these things that are beyond us that do call us forth, that have a spirit to them, a life and energy, right? Of like a way, a better way that we know is possible, or a more loving, good, and true sense of this relationship or this way of gathering together in this place or a way of living together politically, whatever it might be, right? Those living aspirations are things that are outside of us, that are in the space of God beyond us or spirit beyond us, that call to us, that allure us forth into a new becoming. So it's not all just internal, that compelling force. There's also an alluring attraction, I think, to realities that are still becoming, and that's very connected to the eros and the evolutionary process too. Did I? I didn't say it all again. Come on, what? Those are some A words. Where are you with the A words?
I mean, this is I struggle with the tangent that I'm on because when you bring in a word like ambition or aspiration, and we feel the importance of qualifying what we mean when we say those things, then I feel pulled to always say, well, there's a healthy version of that and there's an unhealthy version of that, and how do we discern ourselves individually, collectively, towards the healthy side of those? I don't think there's anything wrong with ambition as long as it's not causing harm to self or others or the planet or other species or whatever. But that if it's an ambition that there's a divine inspiration involved in it, then there's there should I would hope that we're not contributing to human suffering by second guessing it. Like there's healthy shame and there's unhealthy shame. Healthy shame says, I'm not going to pull off my shirt because it's too hot in the room, or grab food off your plate because it looks good to me, or behaving in frankly shameful ways, but it's what I want to do, and everybody else be damned. Um, Same with all of those things. Aspirations is both internal and external. It's not one or the other. We're relational creatures. So relationship to self, relationship with others, relationship with what is. That aspiration is uh, how we discern it. Again, individually and collectively is important. And I have something that I put an asterisk next to that I think connects a lot to these things, but I don't want to jump into it because Beth, I'd love to hear what's coming up for you as well.
I'm ripe for what you have.
Oh, well, I don't know if it's going to be interesting or not. I Something that's been coming up for me as I've been paying attention to our conversation is this dynamism of humility. And you brought it up earlier, Luke, when you said, that sometimes some of our parents would say, well, you don't have to, you get to, which is somewhat of a manipulative task technique to try to get someone to do something by just shifting them,
Mhm.
supposedly their motivation by saying it. I don't like certain house chores. I've always had an ambiguous relationship, say, with doing the dishes. But over the years, I don't, and quite frankly, I don't think the infinite presence of spirit cares about whether or not the dishes get done. My ego cares about whether or not it gets done because if I don't do it, it doesn't get done in our house. So what I've learned is, well, this is my divine assignment. Can I do this as an act of humility? And I don't necessarily mean just pure love, because if I'm going to make it for me, an issue of love, that's going to run dry after a while because I will get impatient and upset that I'm the only one who does it. I'm making my spouse, my family sound horrible. I'm letting you in on my own internal problems.
I wasn't going to
Nobody
say
is
it.
being indicted here. Other things
Rita's
get
not going to
done.
listen to this, right?
Oh,
No,
she's not.
don't worry. Don't worry.
She's got so much going on in her life. She's so busy saving the world, legit, saving the world. So no, I'm picking out one little slice
Yeah, yeah.
of thing, and so what it's done with me is I keep being present, and I don't mean inspiring in a flippant sense, but there's this humility that says, am I really that important? Like, is my egoic activity in this really that important? No, it really is not. When it comes to inspiration, when it comes to participation, when it comes to a lot of these qualities that we've been listing and expressing amongst ourselves, there's this kind of divine humility that comes along with it that does neither exaggerates nor diminishes the role that we are playing in it. And here I am including the human personality, not overblowing it, but not underselling it either because it's a part of the project. It is a part of this whole cosmic human game that we've got going on here. So we don't want to, like, if you think of like an iPad screen or so, you don't want to like blow it out of proportion and you don't want to minimize it so much that it doesn't, it's just a speck. How do we practice this divine humility with inspiration, with aspiration, with enlightenment that situates, the self, others, role, have tos, ought tos, get tos, love tos, all of these things to where, I guess discernment is again coming up again, but it's being done with a certain kind of humility that just neither clings to nor rejects anything, that doesn't exaggerate or diminish anything.
Yeah, that word situate, it really was that was present for me too, like in this way of humility and grandiosity and, we're inspired to, save the world or to do the dishes, like this inspiration, um, there's definitely a lot of ways that I think culturally and historically and personally we probably it can get overblown or it can get like denigrated. So how we situate this lived reality of the energy of this divine vitality and what that calls forth in us is a spectrum, right? It's going to be situated differently for lots of people. And I think that call to discernment that ties into divine vocation, which we'll talk about more in the next podcast, but it kind of answers that question, like what is mine to do, or what is mine to be, in a way that only we can answer for ourselves, right? With divine discernment, with spirit guidance, with our God participation personally and communally. And there's ways that we're exploring that in community too. But I think that's really at the heart of this, is this sense of what is mine to do, and where does the energy and motivation for that come from? And I think my hope is that that comes from the depth of the source of divine being, and that comes forth with an inspiration rather than the obligations of uh, these outcome desires, or this sense of what I might learn from it, or what I might experience in it. Even again, all of those things being good and fine, but there's something more. There's something that is uh, that compelling allure that calls forth, not all the time, not in everything, but into particular actions, into particular ways of being, into specific movements of that life, that inspiration. What is mine to do is a good question. I love the way Mary Oliver puts it. What will you do with your one wild and precious life? And again, the doing is in so many ways the being, but it's the action. It's the action of that. And that's where the inspiration, I feel like, is the living bridge from that deep being of divine vitality into our divine vocation, our expression, our offerings to the world.
Use the word bridge, and I think I'm maybe trying to bridge, but it's real. The humility, the engagement with what we are called in this wild and precious life to express. When we're operating in divine inspiration, from divine inspiration, the movement of the body of Christ together is what I'm just feeling a real sense of wanting to bring forward. I just see it again in community. It's harder to articulate, give example of, but it's so real. And I'm so glad that this variety of aspects have been brought together today to look at this topic and feel the reality of who we are together in Christ.
Yeah, I think, we kind of kicked off some of the conversation with the divine will. And it seems as when we continue to develop and grow in our capacity to connect with ourselves and with others and with spirit in all forms, there's this um, we don't look at will as domination or as control, but as participation, and again from a place of love. So I was using dishes as an example just a minute ago. Sounded like I was throwing my wife under the bus, which I wasn't, but actually it's kind of serves as a nice example of, when if we're going to refer to kids, they do need to know what are good healthy boundaries. Don't cross this line. It's going to harm you and harm your siblings or harm something. It's got to be clear when we're young. But as they get older, like they're all in their 20s now. I'm not telling them what to do. I don't control their lives. I want them to fully maturate and tune. I had a wonderful conversation with our daughter one time, and I just said, my love for you, I will do anything, but within reason, like anything that I can do. Uh, my desire for you is just, I don't want you to needlessly suffer. That's it. I just don't want you to need this. Life has suffering. I don't think life is suffering. Life has suffering, but I don't want you to needlessly suffer. That's the way my love functions between us. And in a certain sense, it's like in that serving, in the inspirations, um, when it keeps developing and maturing and growing and complexifying and getting more layered and nuanced, it's not something that is again an issue of who is going to control the conversation, who's going to manage, who's going to do all those things. Those can be important practical questions, but it's the participation becomes one of, again, enlightenment. It's not yeah, I'm just going to end up repeating, but I guess one slight nuance that I was trying to put into it is that it can be like this, almost, to use it spatially, this like vertical development and horizontal development as well. It's not just one, it's three-dimensional. Maybe that's the best way to put it. So Luke, why don't you bring us home here?
Yeah, we've been with a lot here, and I just feel the fullness of it, and also so many like tendrils of ways that there's nuance and integration and movement and so much with all of this. So again, just kind of back to the energy of it. I guess I kind of want to speak from my one of my divine inspirations in this longing for, and it's really the heart of this call to we creating, that we are participants in the divine nature, and that divine nature is one of creating, loving, serving, giving, offering. And so that is our charge as well. That is our force and energy that we can live from. And what would it be like if we treated life like this creative process where we're seeking to tap into these inner and communal inspirations and aspirations that are present, that are alive in spirit within, among, and beyond us, to engage and bring forth the loving evolution of Christianity in the world, and stop settling for a spirituality that's been so small that treats us like consumers, or that will be placated by some insights. Or I'm not trying to be negative or critical, but it's just far too small. And so this calling to live from our divine inspiration, it's not just a grand and glorious thing, although it is, because it's found in the small moments of that which we maybe don't even want to do. Doing the dishes to help support the house, or disciplining our children in loving ways that don't feel good when when you have to do them, right? It's not about that, but it's coming from a deeper place of love and care and growth for our children, for ourselves, for one another. I say that to my kids, that we're doing this because we want you to be good and healthy adults who are, you said, not needlessly suffer, but like that they'll be more in the love and flow of the relationships with people, right? Um, so in the same way, in our spiritual acts and intentions and efforts and agency, that we can choose to engage in a life lived from the depths of this divine vitality that flows into inspirations of all shapes and sizes, of all sorts of ways of being and living. And from that, be able to more fully inhabit our divine vocation in the world today. And not only will that bless and serve the world, but it will make us personally and communally more whole and true and good and beautiful, to enjoy life and to be creative beings that are filled with joy and suffering and goodness and struggle. And it's all part of the great dance of being that we get to inhabit together and live to the full.